You know, usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of structural precision.
Right.
Like you break your arm and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the radius bone and the doctor just points and says, there it is.
It's a closed loop. We like things to be visible and categorized and, well, binary, honestly,
Yeah.
like broken or not broken.
Exactly. But then you step into the world of neurodevelopment and cognitive processing and trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless. We're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is honestly incredibly murky.
Oh, yeah. It's the definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Yeah.
And primarily that's because we are dealing with the brain's relationship to uncertainty itself.
And that relationship is incredibly hostile.
Yeah, it really is.
Today, we are looking at a stack of research that proves the human brain fundamentally hates a low signal-to-noise ratio. Like, it despises it. And our mission today is to explore how that exact same hatred of uncertainty applies, whether you're buried in the pages of a really dense, confusing book, or you are staring at a completely unpredictable, hot and cold text message from someone in your life.
Yeah, the biological through line connecting a confusing book to a confusing person, it really comes down to the core function of the human brain, which is, it is a prediction machine.
Right.
From an evolutionary standpoint, the brain's entire job is to anticipate what happens next so it can keep you alive.
Yeah.
So when it lacks an anchor, like a clear context or a predictable pattern, it cannot run those predictive models.
So it's basically flying blind.
Flying blind. And when it flies blind, it goes into cognitive overdrive. It allocates these massive amounts of metabolic energy and computing power trying to solve the puzzle, looking for any hidden variable it might have missed.
Wow.
And physically, that intense cognitive overdrive, it manifests in the nervous system as acute anxiety.
So I guess I'll just ask the listener directly, if you've ever felt inexplicably anxious or maybe even just deeply annoyed when you're trying to read a highly recommended book and you just can't get into it. Or on the flip side, if you've ever gotten physically sick, like stomach and absolute knots over someone's unpredictable behavior in a relationship.
Yeah.
Today, we are validating those exact feelings with neuroscience. So let's start with how we interact with information. The sources highlight this really fascinating phenomenon regarding why chatting with an AI model feels completely effortless compared to sitting down and reading a traditional nonfiction book.
Yeah, the distinction really comes down to the mechanics of cognitive processing. In the literature, the AI interaction model is described as active pull or target-driven processing,
Okay.
while the traditional book model relies on passive push.
Active pull versus passive push. Let's break that down, because the moment I read that, it kind of changed how I look at my own screen time.
Oh, absolutely.
When I query an AI, I'm generating the prompt. I am typing a highly specific question into the interface.
Right, and by asking that specific question, your brain pre-installs a cognitive anchor.
Oh, I see.
You have basically constructed a mental framework of expectation before you even read the first word of the generated response.
Because I set the rules.
Exactly, because you dictated the parameters. Every single word the AI returns is immediately put to work filling a specific pre-existing gap in your knowledge architecture.
Oh, wow.
There is virtually no guesswork involved.
Yeah.
The signal-to-noise ratio is incredibly high.
But a book operates on a totally different frequency, right?
Yeah.
When I open a 300-page nonfiction book, I'm essentially at the mercy of a linear experience dictated by the author.
Yeah.
I have to read the literal words on the page, but simultaneously my brain is working overtime trying to guess the author's ultimate intent.
And that's the passive push. The author is pushing information at you, and often they're using long anecdotal setups or historical context or rhetorical flourishes.
A little filler.
Yeah. And if you don't know exactly where the author is taking that argument, your brain is forced to juggle two highly demanding tasks at once.
Which are?
Comprehending the literal syntax of the text and calculating the ultimate utility of that text.
So you're held in this state of cognitive suspension. It kind of makes me think about how we illuminate things. Like reading a traditional dense book cover to cover feels like being locked in the trunk of a wandering bus.
Right?
You have no idea where you were going. You're just along for the ride. Versus chatting with AI, which is like driving a targeted sports car where you mapped the GPS route yourself.
That maps perfectly onto the neurobiology outlined in our sources. These two experiences rely on entirely different reading circuits.
Really?
Yeah. So the trunk of the wandering bus experience, That utilizes the default mode network.
The default mode network, we usually associate that with daydreaming or mind wandering, right? Like the state our brain defaults to when we aren't doing a specific task.
Yeah, it is deeply experience-driven. So people who love reading nonfiction cover to cover, who genuinely enjoy letting the author take them on a meandering journey, they are highly engaged in this network.
Yeah.
They have a massive tolerance for ambiguity.
I see.
They don't mind not knowing where the argument is going for the first 50 pages because they're enjoying the cognitive wonder. It's like taking a walk in the woods.
But there is another circuit, right? The one that gets highly agitated when it's forced to wander without a map.
Yes, the central executive network.
Right?
This is your targeted sports car. It is the target-driven, deconstructive mode of cognition. If your brain operates primarily in this mode, you treat reading as a function call. To borrow a term from computer science,
A function call.
you demand an input, an execution logic, and a clear output.
So if the data I'm reading doesn't immediately snap into a logical decision tree, in my head, my central executive network essentially throws an error code.
Exactly. It registers an uncertainty or noise error. Your brain detects incoming data, realizes it doesn't know where to file that data, and consequently, it cannot determine its value.
And that causes anxiety.
Right? That inability to categorize the information causes a massive spike in cognitive load, which your conscious awareness translates into frustration or boredom or acute anxiety.
Wow. Okay, wait. But we hear all the time that highly successful people, CEOs, billionaires, top thinkers, that they read constantly. Do they just have this superhuman default mode network that can tolerate all this linear noise?
No, actually, the sources explicitly debunk that myth.
Oh, really?
Elite thinkers do not tolerate noise. They actively dismantle it.
Okay.
They treat books like relational databases to be queried, not sacred texts to be consumed cover to cover. And the research basically categorizes elite readers into two distinct camps.
All right, what's the first one?
The first are the high-agency scanners. Elon Musk and Naval Ravikant are classic examples of this.
Oh, right. Naval is famous for saying he treats reading books like scrolling his Twitter feed.
Exactly.
Like if a paragraph is boring, he skips it. If a chapter doesn't apply to him, he just drops the book entirely.
Yeah, high-agency scanners treat literature like open-source code. They utilize first principles thinking to construct a top-level architecture of the topic before they even read chapter 1.
So build the frame first.
Right, they isolate the core thesis. Then they dive into very specific sections of the book merely to extract the variables they need to populate their own mental model.
So they are essentially manually turning the book into an AI prompt.
They are. And they have a ruthless abandonment rate for fluff.
Yes.
If an author takes too long to get to the point, they just discard the text. They refuse to allocate their central executive network's bandwidth to low signal noise.
That honestly makes me feel incredibly validated about my nightstand full of half-read books. I always felt guilty about it.
You shouldn't. You're just scanning for ROI.
Okay, so what is the second type of elite reader?
The lattice synthesizers.
Okay.
Charlie Munger was the absolute archetype for this. He constantly advocated for building a lattice work of mental models.
Right. His whole philosophy was that you need structural frameworks from psychology, microeconomics, evolutionary biology, all interacting together in your head.
Yeah, and lattice synthesizers do not experience the anxiety of uncertainty when reading because they already possess a massive cross-disciplinary coordinate system in their working memory.
Oh, wow.
So when they encounter a new seemingly random fact or a meandering anecdote in a book, it isn't an unmoored piece of noise to them.
It instantly snaps into a pre-existing grid.
Exactly. They are mounting new data onto a massive pre-built structure which drastically lowers the cognitive load of processing new information.
That is such a profound takeaway for anyone trying to learn faster without burning out. The strategy is to basically build the coordinate system first and then load the data.
Yeah.
Like you extract the trunk, the top-level architecture of the book using summaries or AI or just reading the table of contents, and then you only dive into the actual text to hang the specific leaves that you actually care about.
Right.
Because if you are a highly analytical person trying to load raw data without a coordinate system is a recipe for total cognitive exhaustion.
Which perfectly brings us to a real-world application from the sources. The raw log problem.
Yes, let's look at this case study because it's a fascinating test of this exact cognitive theory. The text in question is a collection of historical transcripts. It's Zhu Rongji's speeches from 1991.
Right.
Now, a very quick disclaimer to our listeners. We are analyzing this purely from a cognitive processing and information theory standpoint today.
Yes, absolutely.
We are just looking at the mechanics of how our brains handle complex historical data. We are not endorsing any political frameworks or taking any sides whatsoever.
No, it operates as a perfect stress test for the analytical brain.
Yeah.
A highly analytical reader might pick up this book of speeches, read the first chapter, and feel completely lost and honestly annoyed.
Right.
They will likely conclude that the return on investment of their time is zero, and they'll put the book down.
But why does that happen? Because on the surface, Zhu Rongji was an incredibly effective economic reformer. The data should be valuable, right?
It should be, but the text is not a curated textbook.
Right.
Textbook author has already done the heavy lifting of compressing information and providing the requisite context.
Yeah.
A book of historical speeches is a raw log from a production environment.
A raw log.
It's just a literal transcript of what was said in the room on that specific day.
So the environment variables are completely missing.
Exactly. The context was in the room. It was embedded in the minds of the audience. It was not written on the page.
Okay. Our sources dive into the specific context missing from those 1991 transcripts. And if you don't understand the massive triangular debt crisis happening at the time, where basically state-owned enterprises were just endlessly borrowing from each other and freezing the entire Chinese economy,
Right.
or the severe inflation, or the really intense power struggles between local municipalities and the central government, if you don't know that the speeches just sound like generic, incredibly boring, bureaucratic management speak.
And this activates the brain's background ROI formula.
Okay, what is that formula?
The brain calculates the return on investment of attention by taking the extracted high-density information, that's the numerator, and dividing it by the cognitive bandwidth spent decoding the text, which is the denominator.
Okay, let's run that math. Without the historical context of the triangular debt, the denominator is astronomical.
Huge.
I'm spending huge amounts of mental energy just trying to guess what he's talking about, who his intended audience is, and what the actual stakes are.
Yeah.
And because I'm failing to guess those things, the numerator, the actual useful information I'm extracting, it remains at zero.
Massive denominator, zero numerator. So the central executive network runs that calculation and instantly triggers an abort mission signal. It wants to conserve metabolic energy.
But the sources explain how top macroeconomists read this exact same raw log, and for them, the ROI is off the charts. They are extracting massive value. How are they bypassing the error code?
They inject the variables before they begin reading. A macroeconomist already understands the mechanics of the 1991 economic crisis. So when they read the transcript, they aren't searching for generic management tips. They were scanning the text for leverage points.
How does that change the reading experience? Can you give me an example of a leverage point from the text?
Sure. So in several speeches, Zhu Rongji focuses obsessively on product quality.
Yeah.
Now, to an unanchored reader, this sounds like a corporate platitude, make better products, it's low signal noise.
Right.
But a macroeconomist reading with the environment variables injected knows the actual stakes. The system is frozen. Local governments are heavily protecting deeply inefficient, terrible factories just to maintain employment numbers, and the central government desperately needs to shut them down without triggering a political revolt.
Ah, so product quality isn't a management tip, it's a weapon.
It is an asymmetrical, politically unarguable metric.
Wow.
Think about it. No local official can stand up in a meeting and publicly defend manufacturing dangerous, low-quality products.
Right, you can't argue against quality.
Exactly. So Zhu uses quality control as the proxy, the leverage point, to legally and ethically dismantle the inefficient industries that are dragging down the macroeconomy.
That completely flips the script. If you have the context, you aren't reading a boring speech. You are analyzing a masterclass in political and economic leverage.
Yeah.
But if you lack the context, your brain just reads it as noise. The takeaway here is profound. If you ever encounter a document at work or a dense historical text that feels like a raw log and makes you feel exhausted,
Stop reading linearly.
yes, step back. Go find the environment variables. Use an AI to summarize the macro context and then inject yourself back into the text.
You have to build the lattice work before you can mount the data.
Exactly. Okay, here is the pivot in our source material that takes this entire concept to another level. We've established how our brains throw an error code, literally triggering anxiety, when a text lacks a clear anchor or context.
Right.
What happens when a person lacks a clear anchor?
We move from unpredictable text to unpredictable people.
Yes. Why do analytical, highly intelligent people get so deeply obsessed with flaky, hot and cold individuals? Like, why does a dynamic where someone texts back instantly for 2 days and then totally ghosts you for a week drive an analytical brain completely insane?
The literature reveals that it is the exact same hardware glitch.
Really?
Yeah, society tends to frame our obsession with unpredictable people as a character flaw or a sign of weak boundaries or even this profound romantic attachment. But neurobiologically, it is simply an analytical brain trying to force a closed loop on a low-signal data stream.
It's the Zhu speech all over again, just mapped onto a dating app or a friendship.
Yes. When someone's behavior is hot and cold, they're generating unpredictable feedback. In behavioral psychology, this is known as intermittent reinforcement.
And intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive behavioral mechanism we know of. It's literally the slot machine effect.
Yep.
You don't know if the next pull of the lever is going to yield a jackpot or nothing, so the anticipation forces you to keep pulling.
Chemically unpredictable feedback causes massive dopamine spikes, far higher than predictable, consistent rewards.
Wow.
But for the highly analytical brain, it goes beyond just dopamine. The sources describe a phenomenon known as the bug mentality.
The bug mentality, how does that operate?
Okay, so if you are an individual who naturally seeks high signal-to-noise ratios, you know someone who excels at deconstructing systems and solving complex problems at work.
Right.
You look at a flaky person and you do not see a red flag warning you to walk away. You see a dangling pointer in a line of code.
Oh my gosh.
You see a logic puzzle that demands to be solved.
Yeah.
A bug in the interpersonal system.
So my brain says, why are they acting this way? There must be a reason. If I just analyze their last 10 text messages enough, if I just figure out the hidden environment variables driving their flakiness, I can solve the puzzle and restore predictability to the relationship.
Yes. You are dedicating all of your central executive network's bandwidth trying to turn a zero ROI interaction into a solved equation.
Wow.
You aren't actually obsessed with the person. You are obsessed with resolving the uncertainty.
And because the other person is fundamentally unpredictable, because they're genuinely just generating noise, not hiding a complex signal, the equation is mathematically impossible to solve. You get trapped in an infinite loop of analysis.
Which is incredibly validating to understand.
It really is.
It reframes the whole experience.
Yeah.
You aren't weak. Your brain's logic engine is simply misfiring because it's being fed corrupted data.
But we have to address the physical reality of this because this mental obsession, it doesn't stay confined to the brain. Think about the metabolic cost of that infinite loop. It turns intensely physical.
Oh, yeah.
We are talking about severe digestive issues, nausea, the literal feeling of your stomach tying itself into knots.
This brings us to the somatic toll, and specifically the gut-brain axis.
Yeah.
The sources rely heavily on Stephanie Fu's phenomenal analysis in her book, What My Bones Know, to explain how cognitive uncertainty cascades into physical illness.
Let's trace that cascade because Fu's story bridges the gap between the cognitive and the physical so perfectly.
It does.
She is a highly successful Emmy-winning journalist. To the outside world, she is the ultimate high-achieving analytical thinker.
Right.
But internally, she was suffering from uncontrollable panic attacks and severe gastrointestinal distress. And she was eventually diagnosed with CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
The distinction between PTSD and CPTSD is really crucial here.
Okay, break that down.
So PTSD is typically associated with a single acute traumatic event, a violent assault, a car crash, a specific combat scenario.
Right.
The nervous system becomes frozen around that specific localized memory.
Okay.
CPTSD develops from chronic, inescapable systemic unpredictability over an extended period.
Like growing up in a volatile household where the rules of engagement change daily or experiencing prolonged childhood neglect?
Exactly. In Fu's case, it was chronic abuse and double abandonment by her parents. When a child's developing brain is placed in an environment where the caregivers, the people who are biologically supposed to be their anchors,
Right.
where they are instead sources of erratic danger, the nervous system fundamentally rewires its predictive models.
Wow.
It learns that the floor can drop out at any conceivable moment. The baseline operating state becomes hypervigilance.
So if you possess this rewired nervous system and you encounter interpersonal uncertainty as an adult, say a boss who gives unpredictable feedback or a partner who runs hot and cold, how does the body physically react?
This is where the mechanics of the gut-brain axis take over.
Okay.
When the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection center, encounters this flakiness, it doesn't process it as a mere annoyance. It flags the uncertainty as a literal biological survival threat.
Because the predictive model says unpredictability equals danger.
Exactly. The amygdala instantly triggers the sympathetic nervous system. This is your fight or flight response.
Right.
Your body prepares to physically defend itself or sprint away from a predator. Now, when the sympathetic nervous system activates, it acts as a seesaw. It immediately and aggressively suppresses the parasympathetic nervous system.
And the parasympathetic system is responsible for our resting state. It manages digestion and recovery.
You got it. When your brain believes you are fighting a tiger, or in this case, fighting an unpredictable text message, it decides that digesting your lunch is a zero-priority task.
Wow.
The vagus nerve, which acts as the bidirectional superhighway between the brain and the enteric nervous system in your gut, it signals an immediate halt to digestive processes.
So it just stops.
It pulls blood flow away from the gastrointestinal tract and reroutes it to your major muscle groups.
So the sudden withdrawal of resources from the gut is what causes the physical symptoms.
Fun.
The sudden cramping, the nausea, the acute IBS, the literal knot in your stomach.
Yes.
It's not a metaphor for feeling bad. It's a physiological shutdown of your digestive tract to prepare for combat.
It is entirely physiological. And what's fascinating about Stephanie Fu's journey, which resonates with so many highly analytical individuals, is the facade of success she maintained while this was happening.
Right, she was winning Emmys.
Trauma survivors frequently utilize their massive intellect, their high achievement, and their intense logical analysis as a defense mechanism. In therapeutic frameworks, this is known as developing a manager persona.
The manager. So the manager is the part of the psyche that believes if I just work hard enough, if I analyze the situation flawlessly, if I attain enough accolades, I can construct a fortress of control that will protect me from the unpredictability of the world.
Beautifully put. The manager is essentially burning massive amounts of cognitive bandwidth to mask internal panic.
Wow.
But eventually the physical body, the gut, the immune system, the adrenal glands, it all gives out under the metabolic load. The bones remember the trauma, even if the conscious analytical mind is frantically trying to logic its way out of the pain.
So if my logical brain knows this person is bad for me, but my gut is in knots, how do I fix it? Because logic clearly isn't working. If I try to use cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, that's a classic top-down approach, right?
Right.
We're trying to use conscious logic to talk the physical body off a ledge.
Right.
But if the amygdala is already screaming tiger and the blood has literally left it, your stomach logic isn't going to cut it.
It won't.
How do we actually hack this system? Because our sources outline a multimodal therapeutic approach.
Yeah, because you cannot outthink a survival reflex. You need tools that address the nervous system at different levels of processing. So we start with IFS, or internal family systems.
I found the IFS framework incredibly compelling. It treats the mind not as a single unified consciousness, but as an ecosystem of sub-personality.
Exactly. It posits that we all possess these different parts. We discussed the manager earlier, the overanalyzer, the perfectionist, the part trying to control the environment through logic and achievement.
But the manager's working so frantically because it's trying to protect a much more vulnerable part of the system.
It is fiercely protecting the exile.
Style.
The exile is the part of you, usually rooted in early childhood, that carries the raw pain, the terror of abandonment, the deep shame. The manager is terrified that if you experience uncertainty, the exile will be triggered and the entire system will be overwhelmed by that historical pain.
So when I am obsessively analyzing a text message, trying to figure out why someone is pulling away, that is my manager working overtime.
Yeah.
And normally my reaction is to get furious with myself. I think, why are you doing this again? Stop being so obsessive and needy. I essentially attack the manager.
And IFS posits that attacking your own protective mechanisms is the exact wrong approach.
Really?
The goal of IFS is a paradigm shift. You stop viewing your anxiety or your overanalysis as a structural flaw to be eradicated. Instead, you ally with these protective parts.
How do you do that?
You consciously acknowledge the manager and say thank you for trying to keep us safe by figuring out this puzzle. I know you're working hard, but I'm an adult now and we do not need to solve this text message in order to survive.
Wow, you introduce compassion to the system rather than internal warfare.
You negotiate with your own brain instead of fighting it.
That is so powerful. So that handles the cognitive mapping. But what about the really deeply frozen memories, the visceral stuff that triggers the exiles in the first place?
That brings us to EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay, I have to admit, reading the mechanism for this in the sources sounded almost like science fiction at first.
Ah.
Wait, Does EMDR require some sci-fi brain scanning helmet or something?
No, 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 not at all. It can sound intimidating, but the underlying neuroscience is brilliantly practical. It relies on the limits of working memory.
Oh, okay. The core mechanism of EMDR is bilateral stimulation, right? BLS.
Yes. It can involve tracking a therapist's finger back and forth with your eyes, holding small vibrating tappers in alternating hands, or utilizing a self-administered technique called the butterfly hug.
Right, where you cross your arms over your chest and tap your own shoulders, alternating left and right.
Exactly. The mechanism operates on bandwidth limitation. When you recall a deeply traumatic or highly triggering memory, your brain often replays it in high definition. It's rendering all the original emotional and physiological intensity.
It feels like it is happening right now.
Yes, but human working memory has a strictly limited capacity.
Like trying to run a heavy video editing program while you have 100 tabs open on your browser.
Perfect analogy. When you introduce bilateral stimulation while simultaneously recalling the traumatic memory, you're forcing the brain to dual task.
Ah.
Tracking a moving target or processing alternating physical taps requires a significant chunk of working memory. The brain literally does not possess the computing power to maintain the physical bilateral tracking and render the traumatic memory in high-definition emotional pain at the same time.
So the brain is forced to compromise. It strips the emotional data from the memory to save computing power.
It downgrades the emotional intensity. The memory gets reprocessed and saved, not as a current streaming emergency, but as a standard historical event in the past.
Wow.
It effectively removes the somatic charge from the memory.
That is an incredible hack of the brain's hardware. So we have IFS for system negotiation and EMDR for memory reprocessing. But what about the acute moment, when the gut is churning right now and the vagus nerve has pulled all the blood away from your digestion?
That requires a bottom-up physical intervention. You have to bypass the thinking brain entirely and send a physiological signal from the body back up to the brain stating we are safe.
So we need vagal nerve regulation.
Yes.
The most effective immediate tool mentioned in the sources for this is the physiological sigh. Walk me through the mechanics of why this works so fast.
The execution is simple. It's a double inhale through the nose, so one long inhale followed immediately by a sharp, short top-up inhale to maximally inflate the lungs.
Okay.
And that is followed by a very long, slow exhale through the mouth.
What is happening biologically during that specific breathing pattern?
The double inhale is crucial.
Yeah.
It physically pops open the tiny collapsed alveoli in your lungs, which allows you to offload a massive volume of carbon dioxide.
Oh.
But the magic happens on the exhale. The long, slow, extended exhale physically forces your heart rate to slow down.
And when the heart rate drops, the vagus nerve detects the change.
Yes, and it immediately signals the amygdala to stand down. It breaks the gut-brain stress loop in real time.
The sources also mention splashing freezing cold water on your face to achieve a similar reset.
That triggers the mammalian dive reflex, which instantly lowers your heart rate and forces the parasympathetic nervous system back online.
So if we take all this, the way our analytical brains demand certainty, the somatic toll when we don't get it, and the bottom-up hacks to calm the system, we need a hard protocol.
Yes.
Because redefining the noise is great in theory, but analytical brains are stubborn. They want to keep debugging the person. If a listener faces a low-signal situation tomorrow, like a confusing text message that sends their stomach into knots, what are the hard rules of engagement?
The sources outline a very strict three-part protocol for firewalling your cognitive bandwidth. Step 1 is a fundamental cognitive reframe. You have to redefine certainty.
We normally think certainty comes from solving the puzzle. Like, if I can just figure out why they ghosted me, I'll have certainty.
You have to flip that architecture entirely. The protocol dictates that fuzzy, ambiguous behavior is the 100% certain answer.
That completely flips the script. Instead of waiting for a clear answer, you're treating the confusion as the definitive answer.
If someone is hot and cold, the irrefutable fact is they are unreliable. There is no hidden variable to unearth that will magically make them consistent. The noise is the signal. The case is closed.
Stop trying to run the ROI equation on a zero-numerator interaction. I love that. What is the second step to enforce this?
Step 2 is the two-strike rule. You must institute a hard temporal boundary.
Okay.
Highly analytical people tend to extend infinite patience to unpredictable systems because their manager part is so determined to solve them. You cannot rely on willpower. You need a firewall.
A two-strike temporal boundary.
If an interaction, whether it's a dynamic with a colleague or a texting pattern with someone you are dating, yields zero ROI or unpredictable noise twice in a row, without a valid, explicitly stated reason, you automatically downgrade their access to your cognitive bandwidth.
Wow.
You move them from core focus to casual acquaintance. You cut the computing power.
And the final step.
Step 3 is the immediate physical halt. Your body will recognize the uncertainty before your conscious brain does.
Right.
The moment your stomach tightens or you feel that spike of adrenaline when you look at a confusing text, you must execute a hard halt. No texting back, no analyzing the subtext, no drafting responses in your notes app.
You step away and do a 3-minute physiological sigh protocol, or you go splash cold water on your face. You force the parasympathetic nervous system online first, because until the physical body is calm, your logic engine is corrupted by adrenaline.
Exactly. Only when the vagal tone is restored are you allowed to engage your logical brain to execute the two-strike rule.
Redefine the ambiguity as the answer, enforce the two-strike firewall, and regulate the physical body before you analyze. Let's take a step back and look at the massive arc we've covered today.
It's a lot.
It is. We started with the premise that our brains fundamentally crave high signal-to-noise ratios. As prediction machines, they demand predictability.
And the metabolic cost of unpredictability is severe anxiety.
Right. Whether we are reading a dense book like an elite scanner, ripping the architecture out of it and aggressively ignoring the linear noise, or whether we are protecting our gut-brain axis by walking away from the intermittent reinforcement of an unpredictable person, the ultimate goal is identical.
Yep.
We have to stop wasting our precious cognitive bandwidth trying to decode noise. We have to take deliberate control of what we allow into our mental and physical operating systems.
It requires the humility to realize that not everything is a puzzle meant for you to solve. Sometimes noise is just noise, and the most analytically sound decision you can make is to hit mute.
I really love that framing. But before we wrap up this deep dive, you always leave us with a great final thought, a way to apply this that pushes the boundary a bit further. What is the provocative thought for today?
Well, we spent this entire discussion exploring how our brains treat external inputs, books, historical texts, other people. We treat them as systems to be decoded.
Yeah.
And we've detailed how to block out the low-signal noise from the outside world. But consider this. What if you applied this exact same framework to your own internal anxiety?
Treat the anxiety itself as a system to be decoded.
Or rather, treat it as noise.
Oh.
We have been conditioned to view our anxiety as a profound emotional truth. When we feel anxious, our immediate assumption is that the anxiety is delivering an urgent, undeniable message about who we are, or it's warning us of a legitimate, imminent failure.
Right.
But what if it's not? What if your anxiety is just a low-signal data stream?
Just a temporary hardware glitch in the nervous system.
Precisely.
Mm.
What if, instead of believing the anxiety and letting it dictate your actions, you can just acknowledge it, label it as internal noise, filter it out, and consciously choose not to download that glitch into your core operating system?
So the anxiety isn't a prophecy of doom, it's just a misfiring X-ray machine. You don't have to put a cast on your arm just because a broken machine is showing you a blurry picture. You just recognize the machine is glitching, take a deep breath, and walk out of the room.
You regulate the system, and you leave the noise behind.
That is a brilliant place to leave it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Remember to utilize that physiological sigh today, protect your cognitive bandwidth fiercely, and stay curious. We'll catch you on the next one.